Greetings. Welcome to our introduction in the public diplomacy course to our module number 3. This is a very exciting module and I really enjoy it. I enjoy all of them, of course, but this module 3 focuses on 21st century tools and techniques of public diplomacy. These are what we call the public diplomacy toolbox, and we'll be going through them in the module, and also cultural diplomacy practices. A public diplomacy toolbox, we're going to look at it. Okay, what is a toolbox? Well, the toolbox can be a huge variety of actual tools for reaching out to get the message out, to get your diplomatic message and objectives out to the world. You can use press conferences, you can use speeches, you can use all kinds of media, broadcast, print, and all the new social media, all the digital technology. These are among the many, many kinds, and there are many more that we will discuss, but they're all within that range in the public diplomacy toolbox. Then we're going to also look at the use of this toolbox for cultural diplomacy, and what are the cultural diplomacy practices. And these cultural diplomacy practices can include things like exhibitions, shows, film, musical concerts, art exhibits, all kinds of seminars, symposia, conferences, the gatherings of people to use and talk about use cultural diplomacy for achieving your foreign policy objectives or your international organization mission goals, or if you're a citizen diplomat, to achieve your goals to get your message out to the world. And all of these are the tools for doing this. This is what we're going to be discussing in this. We're also going to focus, first of all, I would say, to let you know that speeches and speech are really still the most basic tool in public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy. And if you think in practically all diplomacy, giving speeches, and this again goes back to the beginning of humans who began speaking, and they reached out to other groups by trying to speak. Maybe they couldn't be understood. Maybe somebody had to interpret with a sign language or something. We don't know. But speech has been with us. Speeches as a basic tool of all kinds of diplomacy, and especially of all public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy. So we're going to look a lot at that. We're going to be examining, so we get in this module 3, the big aim is for all of you and to become familiar with the huge array of tools and practices that we have at our disposal to use to promote diplomatic objectives by using public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy. So I welcome you to this module 3 on the 21st century tools and techniques, the public diplomacy toolbox, and cultural diplomacy practices. Thank you. Welcome again to our course on public diplomacy. And this is an introduction to our module number 4. Our module number 4 is on diplomacy and the media in the 21st century, planning and working with the media. We're going to be talking about all of this. So why are we talking about the media, or in the news media, and diplomacy? Because it is basic to public diplomacy in the 21st century and cultural diplomacy. The media coverage, practically everything that we do diplomatically either gets planned coverage by the diplomats or unplanned coverage. And the importance this module focuses on the great importance of understanding how the media work, how the news media operate, why some news is news and other events don't make much news, why there may be poor coverage, negative coverage of diplomatic activities, and how you can work to get more positive and fairer coverage of your diplomatic activities in the local, the national, and the international news media. So we're going to talk about this here in this module. It's very important because it's so basic in the 21st century for diplomats to understand and acknowledge that their work, wherever, even if they think it's secret, is probably going to become public and exposed and covered somehow in the news media. So we're going to have an overview to understanding the relationship, the interrelationship of diplomacy in the news media. I will say basically, and I have said this for some years, even before it was acknowledged, more acknowledged or recognized by most diplomats, diplomacy and the news media are completely intertwined today. There is no way that they are not connected. It used to be in the even at the end of the last century and into the early part of this century, that many diplomats said, oh, that public diplomacy was separate from regular diplomacy. That is simply not true. It should not be true. If anybody wants to practice diplomacy successfully, they have to understand public diplomacy, and that has to be include a major part of that has to be understanding how the news media work, how the relationship works between diplomacy and the media. You cannot hide from the news media. So this module 4 is very much about dealing with the media, designing media strategy and plans for all diplomatic work, even including on how to be interviewed, how to give a successful interview, and also focusing on digital diplomacy, because digital diplomacy, all public diplomacy, I mean, any kind of diplomacy can be digital nowadays. So digital diplomacy is just a part of all diplomacy, but especially in public diplomacy, we need to know how to use digital diplomacy. I will say that personally, this is very important to me because I have been a diplomatic correspondent covering world diplomacy and local diplomacy and international and regional diplomacy. So I've been on the journalistic side. I have also worked as a press secretary, both for politicians and also as press attaché in embassies, and I've worked also at the United Nations. So this is extremely important for not just for me, but because I do have a very good understanding of how the news media and diplomacy work together. And if they don't work together, you're going to often have very negative coverage of what you would prefer to have positive coverage of diplomatic activities and diplomacy and diplomatic accomplishments. So welcome to this module 4 on diplomacy and the media in the 21st century. Thank you.